San Diego Comic-Con. I feel like everybody should know at this point what San Diego Comic-Con is, but if for some reason you've, I don't know, been stuck in a cave for a while or stumbled through a wardrobe into a magical world for a couple of years and haven't heard of it, San Diego Comic-Con is one of the biggest conventions on the planet. It's huge. It is a massive comics and popular art convention in San Diego, California that is known for many things, from the absolutely obscene overnight lines for a panel in Hall H to off-site activations that are sometimes, if not always, harder to get into than the con itself. I went to Comic-Con for all 4 days because I get a professional pass because yes, I am just that cool. Yes, I wore this outfit. Yes, it slapped. And while I was there, I got something that I honestly didn't expect to get at Comic-Con. A whole bunch of free books. Now, I love books. I love reading, as you probably guessed by the title of this channel, so I decided, what the hey, why not? It's a few days after Comic-Con. I'm going to go over every single book that I managed to snag as a giveaway and tell you all about them and whether or not I'm super excited to read them. Spoiler alert, I am super excited to read them. Oh, by the way, before I forget to do it, welcome to my channel, The Shane in the Library. I'm Shane, this is my library, and this is my side quest that launched before the main quest somehow, where I talk about all the books I'm reading, all the books I'm writing, and everything related to, well, literature. Before I get into each of the books themselves, I should probably tell you how I got all of these books for free at Comic-Con without stealing, breaking any major federal, local, or state laws, or doing anything incredibly unethical. Comic-Con in the last, I don't know, decade has grown to kind of be a little bit of everything under the label of popular arts. And as such, a ton of book publishers have booths at Comic-Con to talk about their upcoming releases, let you meet their authors, do some signings, and generally build a lot of hype to try and convince you to go out and buy more books. Now, a ton of publishers are there at Comic-Con, but if you want to get free books, your best bet is to stop by the booths from the Big Five. This year, 3 of them were there that I could find: Hachette, Penguin Random House, and Simon & Schuster. Generally, what these publishers will do is they'll put out a schedule in advance where they will have book signings and book giveaways from advanced readers' copies to books that they've had coming out recently to books they have sequels or other books in a series coming out from that they are trying to get you to read. Some of these require you to show up in advance to get a ticket at a certain time or show up a certain hour before in order to line up. I will talk about that later. Penguin Random House, why are you the way that you are? Whereas others will just put books on a table and whoever comes and gets them first gets them first. I managed to pick up 8 books at Comic-Con from Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, and 1 from Viz Media. Yeah, the manga publisher. We'll get to that in a second. And of those books, I got 4 different kinds: samples, regular copies, signed copies, and advanced readers' copies. And I'm going to go through them in pretty much that order. Now, I've been babbling on and on for a long time, so I'm just going to go straight into talking about the books I got and whether I'm excited to read them or if I have already read them. Now, the first one I have is a sampler from Viz, the manga company. I don't read manga, but I pick up the sampler every single year that I go to try and see what's new, to see if there's anything that catches my eye. I read more webtoons and graphic novels in terms of my comic consumption, but I am very open to any sort of manga that might catch my attention. So if you've got a good suggestion, drop it in the comments below. Here's what this book looks like. It has 8 samples of different mangas in here, none of which grabbed my attention per se. Yes, I read all 8 already. Mangas for me don't take that long to go through. Comics in general don't take that long to go through. I have a very fast reading speed, but it's nice to get every single year, and it's nice to keep your eye open because you never want to close yourself off to a new genre of fiction. Moving right along, we go into our regular books, just like you'd buy at any bookstore. I got 2 of those at the convention this year, both of them from the Simon & Schuster booth from their various imprints. One of them is young adult, one of them is adult fiction. Starting off with the young adult, I got a copy of Skandar and the Unicorn Thief from their Start a Series giveaway when they were trying to promote some of their young adult series, trying to get people to read more of the young adult series. I feel like they're kind of targeting kids with these giveaways, but at the same time, they often don't do them on Kids Day, so I am kind of confused as to what their marketing plan is for that. This paperback also cracks me up because Simon & Schuster, I did notice that the reason you gave away this specific copy and a lot of the copies of your paperbacks is this is one of your off prints. There is gold foiling and some embossing and some debossing and all sorts of fun stuff on here, but it's slightly off from the rest of the printing on the cover, which is probably the reason you decided to give this away at a Comic-Con instead of putting it into an actual bookstore. Now, to be fully honest, I haven't read a young adult book in quite some time, but as a writer, I want to write young adult books because I find that a lot of the trends and a lot of the popular things that we put into mainstream modern adult fiction start out cutting their teeth in the young adult sphere. Young adult can be a lot more experimental than the mainstream mainstream adult fiction genres and has a lot more wiggle room with what they include in their plots, the kind of elements that they're including, and it's a great space to go if you want to write something a little bit different and target a different audience and just grow as a writer. So I figured picking up a book like this is a great option to figure out, hey, what's going on in the young adult sphere? What kind of language are they using? How are they writing their books? What can I deconstruct out of books like this and my inordinate collection of Rick Riordan behind me to find out how I want to write and tell the stories that I want to tell in this market? So because of that, this book is not next in my TBR, but it's pretty high up in my upcoming books in my TBR so that I can kind of get more experience in reading the genre and getting back into writing that genre. Moving on to my next regular copy like you get at a bookstore, also from the Simon & Schuster booth, we're going towards definitely not young adult with Road to Ruin. This book's by Hannah Lee. The way it's described on the blurbs and on the back and on summaries and by some of the readers is it's a sapphic romance meets Mad Max meets science fiction and fantasy. It sounds like it's got a lot of really great elements. I'm a little bit different than most Comic-Con goers in that I don't just swarm booths like a madman if they have the word free overhead. I don't want to clutter up my apartment with more crap. It's small enough as it is. So I make sure that if I'm picking out, like say, a free book, I want it to be a book I actually want to read. This book seems relatively on the smaller side. It's about 200 to 300 pages, and it looks like it's got a really, really interesting premise and story. So I'm actually pretty excited to read this one. This one's very, very high up on my TBR list. I should be plunking this book through in a few days pretty soon. Now, with their giveaways at Comic-Con, booths don't just hand you a book and say, here you go, enjoy reading it. Sometimes you get a neat opportunity to actually meet authors of these books. And the authors go into these giveaways a lot of the times at the booth expecting the readers to not have read their book yet, to know that they're trying to speak to new readers who might be interested in the genre, might be looking for something new to read. I went to one of these signings. They were actually really hard to get. I'll talk about that in a second. We want to talk about the book first. That book is Fever House. His book is by Keith Rawson. He's a cool dude. Got to meet him at Comic-Con. He seems like he really loves what he does. And the especially cool part about this is that it is signed and personalized. He went through and he signed and personalized every single copy that he signed. He was there for like well over an hour signing copies on multiple days. This author really clearly cares about his work. He's got another book coming up soon, and this book looks really interesting. The best way that I can honestly sum this up is a hitman goes to collect debts, finds a monkey paw on a fridge that ends up causing a zombie apocalypse. That sounds insane, and I kinda can't wait to read it. I read a lot of different genres, and horror was one of the bigger ones that I read growing up. I just got done getting back into it by reading Frankenstein. I'm excited to read this because everyone loves a good zombie book. I mean, let's be honest, zombie books are just a pinnacle of horror tropes. And the fact that this is signed honestly makes it a little bit more special because I got to meet the author and hear him talk about his work and hear him interact with other readers and fans of the genre and see his passion for what he wrote. And I would love to have more books like this, but the booth that had the most signings was Penguin Random House. And Penguin Random House, we got to pause for a second. Hold on. I got a little bit of, Penguin Random House. When you say you're giving out slots in the line at 10 a.m. when people show up at 9:50, you should not be out of tickets already to get a signing with an author, because it is not yet 10 a.m. Quasi-hilariously and extremely frustratingly, Penguin Random House this year apparently decided to hand out tickets the moment their booth was open, despite publicizing in multiple places, hey, you have to show up at 10 a.m. to get tickets for the signings. This meant that on multiple days, people would show up at 10 a.m., say, hey, I'd like to get some tickets for these signings, and Penguin Random House would be like, we ran out at 9:30 when early admittance let in, or we ran out at 9 a.m. when first admittance was first letting in for the day, and some of the other exhibitors came and got tickets for our signings. Like, I overheard conversations from people who were working booths of other publishers and book companies and people who were on the floor who were very excited because they got their favorite author to sign their book at the Penguin Random House booth. But the reason they got that ticket is because they got onto the floor before the actual attendees, and so the attendees didn't get those tickets. And I will give Penguin Random House and all these publishers one out for doing something similar to this. If you are giving these tickets to somebody who's working the floor at another publishing booth, that kind of makes a little bit of sense, because some of these may be your competitors, but a lot of them are your colleagues. You are all in the book publishing industry together. And let's be honest, the book publishing industry, it's on an upswing, but it had a rough patch for a little bit there. So building bridges is a great idea when you want to not have your entire industry burn and fall apart with a violent death. But at the same time, make those booksellers come at 10 a.m. If you have a special stack for other booksellers to grab those tickets, that they can come really quickly up to the table, grab it, and then go back to their own booth, because hey, they're kind of working a job right now. Most readers probably wouldn't be too mad about that, because we understand that workers need to be able to know what's going on throughout the industry. And a lot of the people who work in the publishing houses are just as excited about these authors as we are. You don't go and work for a publishing house for a miserable salary because you don't like books. You go and work for Penguin Random House or Hachette or Simon & Schuster or any of the smaller presses because you love books, even though the salaries are absolutely abysmal. So please do better next year, Penguin. Before I move on to the advanced readers copies that I got at the convention, I wanted to also show one final thing that Penguin Random House was giving out. If you pre-ordered the Mace Windu book, that's super adorable. They gave out these little pins. It's just the cutest little, it says, "I find your lack of books disturbing." I can't wait to read that book, by the way. The author was on a panel at the con for Filipino martial arts and cinema and popular arts and culture, and the panel was absolutely awesome. I did Filipino martial arts for a few years. I specifically did Babao style Arnis. I absolutely loved it, but fell out of practice because college and life kind of tend to get in the way of things. And it was really cool to hear this author talk about how he included his own practice of martial arts and specifically elements of Filipino martial arts in the upcoming Mace Windu book. So I'm excited to see what gets included, what kind of elements this author wrote in to show fighting and their own experience lived as a practicing martial artist into their literature on a legendary swordsman in my favorite space wizard science fiction, definitely for grown adults franchise. Now moving on to what I think is probably the coolest selection of books at Comic-Con that I was able to get my hands on. I was able to get my hands on a couple of advanced readers copies. For those of you who don't know, because you don't pay a huge amount of attention to BookTok and BookTube and all of the other literature spaces, and you're clicking on this video because I had the words Comic-Con in the title, an advanced reader's copy is a copy of a book that is given out before official publication that's designed to build hype and publicity and press and get people to review it on Goodreads and Amazon and just drive sales towards a book by getting people who might be notable in the space to read it, by getting general public members who might be interested to leave reviews before launch day so people are more incentivized to read it, because nothing sells a book better than a good review. How many times have my fellow gremlins out there read a book because one of their friends said, "Oh my God, you've got to read this book, it's so good." Like, I have read plenty of books because I have been recommended them by family or friends. That's how I discovered a lot of new genres. That's how I discovered the Vampire Chronicles and all of Anne Rice's work, is I had somebody who said, "Shane, you really need to read this book about queer vampires because you don't understand how good it is." And they were right. I did not understand how good it was. Now I do, and I'm better for it. Now, I've ordered these in the order of when they are going to be releasing. So the soonest upcoming book is at the very top of this pile, and the farthest release out is at the bottom of the pile. And there is a reason for that. There's a method to the madness. You'll understand once I get to the last book. The first book I've got is a retelling by Ava Reid, Lady McBee. No, I'm not going to say her full name. I was a theater major, and the Scottish play is absolutely cursed. I don't want to curse my apartment or this video, so we're going to call it Lady McBee's. In the play, this character is already extremely interesting. So the ability to be able to step in their shoes, look through their eyes, and see all the events of one of Shakespeare's most notorious cursed plays is definitely a super solid premise. I got this book at the Penguin Random House booth. This was a different kind of giveaway. Penguin Random House decided each day to announce spontaneous giveaways on their schedule that they announced at the beginning of the con that were themed or had specific authors that didn't have a signing attached, where you would just go up to the booth and you would grab one, first come, first serve. I actually didn't know they were doing this. They gave out this book way earlier in the day, but they had a few copies left over at the very end of the day that they were giving them out. So as I was walking around the floor in that last half hour just trying to see what I could find, I managed to snag a copy of this, and I'm really, really excited to read it. By the way, if you do go to Comic-Con and you aren't able to get a book out of the giveaway that you are hoping for, it is a long shot, but it is actually a good strategy a half hour before the floor closes on the exhibitor floor to try walking around and seeing if any of the publishers have any books left over they have out on the table. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, it's way up there. That same strategy is how I got this arc last year at Comic-Con. This is the first few chapters of the Nico D'Angelo book that was coming out by Rick Riordan at the time. They had a few copies left over at the Disney Hyperion booth that I managed to snag because I was there the last half hour or so, the last day, and they were trying to get rid of the few copies they had left. They saw me looking at some of the other books that were on display that were for sale that were from like similar genres and similar types of vibes. So one of the people who was working there was like, "Hey, we got one of these left over. If you want it, you can totally have it." And I was like, "Please, I would love this." this. I adore Rick Riordan. So if you did not manage to get a slot at some of these giveaways, then I don't know, try that. It's gotten me a book both years at the con that I did not expect to get otherwise. The next few books are all from Simon & Schuster, and they all use the same strategy for publishing their arcs. Each of these is coming out a little bit later in the timeline. The earliest I have is coming out in October. The latest I have is coming out next year. And for books like these, where you're giving out the arcs this far in advance and the book that you're publishing is going to come out first in hardcover, what the publishers seem to have done is they've taken that hardcover book and they've just put it into a paperback, which is great for me because I love reading paperbacks. But it's also nice because I get these nice, bulky 6x9 paperbacks that are a ton of fun to read that I don't get enough of, honestly. Please, publishers, make more 6x9 sized paperbacks. Thank you. Now, the first of these books I have is The Queen. It's by Nick Cutter. It's coming out in October 2024. This book looks to be a horror thriller, which kind of makes it perfect for me to get right now because I just finished The God of the Woods, a really, really good book. I'm going to review that at some point in the future, either on this channel or on my Substack. Link to my Substack where I review books is in the description. Like I just said, I just finished a really good mystery book. It's one of my current 5-star books of the year, so I'm really excited to just dive right into another one, and it's going to be really hard to resist. I want to read this in October because that's just such a good time. So I'm going to have to put some other really enticing books in my TBR ahead of this in order to make sure that I save this for October, but it looks really, really good. I really like the cover design. It looks like a cheap out of print, like mass market paperback that you would get in the 1990s or the 2000s. I have a few of those. I have a deep love for cheap crap out of print pulp paperbacks because I find the stories are honestly genuinely sometimes the wildest and weirdest things, but also are really, really quite spectacular. So this cover honestly just draws me in more and just kind of comes together in a whole package that I'm very excited. I'm very excited about a lot of these books. I'm very excited. I can't wait to read this in October and to tell all of you what I think about it in that month. Moving on to a genre that's obviously completely the same and very similar, we've got The West Wind, a romantasy novel. I read a lot of genres. One of those genres I don't frequently read is romantasy. Honestly, I don't think I am the target audience for a romantasy book as a, masculine presenting cisgendered straight white man. But I want to get into it because romantasy has a lot of really interesting voices that are coming out of it, and the absolute rabid fervor on BOOKTOK for romantasy books right now. There's got to be something there. Either way, this is The West Wind by Alexandria Warwick. It comes out in November. The really interesting thing about this book and the premise of this book and what looks to be the rest of the books that are coming out in this series is that they actually feature a lesser known set of Greek gods, the 4 Greek gods, the winds that come from the 4 directions of the earth. Obviously, this book is about Zephyrus, the West Wind. And while I'm excited to read it, I'm not quite as rabidly excited as, say, the book I just talked about or the book I'm going to talk about in a second. This book is more an opportunity for me to dip my toes into another genre that I plan on dipping my toes heavily into. I do plan on reading all of the insanely popular books that came out of the romantasy genre. Romantasy is a fast-growing, massive genre right now. Some of the most published fantasy authors on the planet at the moment are publishing in romantasy or romantasy-adjacent series. So as an author, it's extremely irresponsible for me not to read some of these books, to understand these books. And honestly, I have considered writing romance and other romance adjacent books under pseudonyms because I do actually read romance and romance adjacent books. I know, weird. I am not the target audience for it, but if it's a good romance, oh, it's a good romance and it hits right. So I'm hoping that this book is, well, one of those, that it'll hit really well and that it'll be a good introduction to the genre. And if it's not, well, trust me, you'll all hear about it. I've got thoughts on the X-Hex. It's coming. Also, I'd like to note a fun thing about getting arcs in like this book in particular. The side looks like it's got like neat scuffing as a part of the book pattern. No, they just, with arcs, they're trying to get as many people to read these as possible. So they're not always printed with the highest quality covers. They're usually a little bit pixelated and they can get scratched real easily. So I'm going to have to like try not to completely demolish this when I read it because I literally take books everywhere. I always have a book in my bag. I read them on the bus. I read them on the train. I read them while I'm going places. I read them everywhere. So a book like this probably isn't best suited to kicking around my bag everywhere I go because it's already got a ton of scuffs on it just from one day of going from Comic-Con to my apartment. So this is probably going to be one that I like read in bed. Maybe I'll do like a reading vlog. Let me know in the comments if you want to see me read Romantasy for the first time as a reading vlog with like live reactions, because if you want to see it, I'll definitely do it. Also, by the way, like the queen of the book that's coming next, this was from the Simon & Schuster booth. The Simon & Schuster booth had basically all of their imprints there in some form or another, either giving out books or having tables where they could sell books and talk to customers. Publishing booths are honestly a great way to talk to people in the publishing industry, just to learn about what they like and to be excited about books as a reader, because all of the people who are there are genuinely excited about a lot of the books that they sell and the books that they're publishing, because that's why they got into the industry. So the next book I have has moved to the #1 slot on my TBR. I am reading it literally starting today because I just finished a book. And part of the reason it's so high on my TBR is it's an interesting premise, but also part of the reason it's so high on my TBR is the book itself is super, super interesting. And this book is When We Were Real by Daryl Gregory. This looks to be like a fun science fiction story that is set in a simulation. Already a fan of that. Read several books like that when I was a kid. I recommend epic in that genre if you're looking for something more dramatic. So the premise of this story is it's a bunch of characters who are on a bus tour in a simulation to a lot of the locations that are weird or unique in the simulation. Stuff like glitches in the code and all of that make their simulation truly unique. And while they're on this bus tour, these characters have to come to terms with who they are, the fact that they're in a simulation, and that nobody quite knows why they're in a simulation or what happens if it's turned off. From the cover and the marketing, it looks like it's got to have a lot of humor, a lot of great existential dread. We love that. And what put this book over the top to put it as my very next TBR is that this book comes out in April of 2025. That is insane to me how far in advance this arc has been released. Like, it's published so early that the author about page and the acknowledgments doesn't actually have any text in it besides basically publisher speak for text will go here. There's even a little like publishing quirk in their like letter that they put in the front to like try and get like influencers and readers to review the book and read the arc and kind of explain their marketing plan, where they literally have insert laugh emoji written in there instead of the laugh emoji, because this is how far in advance this book has been read. So I want to read this as soon as possible, not just so that I can jump on and be one of the early reviewers of this book, not just because it's a very interesting premise, but because this is a really, really cool opportunity as a writer and a reader to see a book super, super early in development, and to, when it comes out in April of 2025, see how the book is different. See if anything has changed, see what's been added in author's notes, see what's been added in acknowledgments, see if anything major in the plot has been overhauled since this arc was released. Also, rather funnily, I have to give Simon & Schuster some credit on this specific arc, because this is one of the nicer covers and one of the nicer printed arcs. I actually really like this cover. I think it's very simplistic and very neat, but when you couple it with the actual premise of the book itself, it just really fits. It really entices you and draws your attention in. So excellent job on that. I'm very excited to read this, and this is going to be next on my TBR. I'm literally starting this tonight after I'm done finishing this video. So very, very excited. Cannot wait. And that is all 8 books that I got at Comic-Con this year. They were giving away like 30 or 40 between the 3 or 4 booths that were doing giveaways, but these are the 8 that I managed to get my hands on. It can actually be a little bit of a madhouse trying to get books during the book giveaways. A lot of readers go to Comic-Con. If you liked this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below of which of these books you are the most interested in hearing my thoughts about, or that you are most excited to read, or which of these books you just have really, really strong opinions on the author about. Also, check out my description for links to all of the books that I mentioned in this video and the Substack that I mentioned earlier. And also, if you want to read my books, you can go to Kindavella and read one of them right now. Death of the White Rabbit is currently on episode 14, I believe, at time of filming this video. So go and check that out. I think it's super interesting. It's a dark fantasy dystopian mystery book. So if that's interesting to you, make sure to check it out, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios, gremlins.